The church needs to adapt to engage millennials.
But it's necessary for millennials to accept the traditions of a faith community.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
I am also going to welcome you to today's program, and thank you for being here, and thank you, Mark, for that introduction. Looking forward to today's discussion. It's very timely and very important. Before we get started, I would like for you to meet the panelists. Let's go around the table and ask them to introduce themselves. Let's begin with the gentleman to my right.
I'm Bishop Michael Olson, and I am the Bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Fort Worth, Texas.
I'm Rabbi Dan Levin. I'm the Senior Rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
Hi, I'm Tony Matthews, and I serve as Senior Pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
I'm Andrea Luxton. I'm President of Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, which is affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Hi, I'm Carl Troval. I'm the Richard J. Dinda Professor of Lutheran Identity and Mission at Concordia University in Austin, Texas, which is affiliated with the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod.
And my name is Mel Robeck. I'm Senior Professor of Church History and Ecumenics and Special Assistant to the President for Ecumenical Relations at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. I'm an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God.
Well, thank you, everyone, for being here today. As you can see, we have a great panel set up here today, and thank you each one for taking time from your schedules, from the things you normally do, to be here for this important discussion. Let's get right to our subject. Brianna Parker is the founder of Black Millennial Café, an organization that seeks to research attitudes of Black millennials toward the church. In an interview in Christianity Today, Parker shows her enthusiasm for the potential for the church to be innovative, but she adds, the church has far too often been bandwagoners who have followed trends as opposed to blazing cultural trails. And I'm hoping to see believers begin to invest in the work of entrepreneurs who want to lead and trailblaze in the tech world, she says. Parker sees millennials as having the mindset and talent to bring freshness, authenticity, and courage to the table. However, she warns that particularly for Black millennials, the issues of justice and the church's engagement or lack of engagement with them will impact the connections of millennials with the church. She states on behalf of this demographic, and I quote, "It is unacceptable to watch or subscribe to a faith that continues to marginalize African Americans, ignore our plight, and preach equality with no repentance or plan for repair and equity," close quote. She challenges us. Faith organizations cannot divorce the realities of life to dream in the sanctuary via the sermonic moment. Today, I'm asking the panelists to respond to at least these three questions. First of all, should our commitment to being engaged in a church community be dependent on whether we like the stand it takes on justice or any other particular issue for that matter? Another question, do you agree that the church more often harbors bandwagoners rather than those that blaze cultural trails? And finally, do you think Parker is right in her analysis of how the church can engage millennials, and particularly Black millennials? That is our subject for today. Let's go back to those who helped to begin the program. And Dr. Luxton, special welcome back to you today. Glad you're here. You have a pretty busy schedule there at Andrews University, so thank you for taking time. More thoughts on this subject, if you would, please, because I suspect you work with some millennials.
I work with a lot of millennials, both some of the staff and faculty, but a lot of students, particularly graduate students. And then, of course, you have the Gen Z coming along now in undergraduates who in some ways think quite similarly. So as I read this, this is very much along the lines of many of those that I work with on a day-to-day basis. And there is a huge amount of energy. There's a huge amount of desire that I sense among this demographic to be part of a faith tradition, to be part of community and bring change. But that and bring change is really, really critical in the way they think and see things. I like the words. It is unacceptable is interesting to me, because that's a word I've heard multiple times from this demographic. It says it is unacceptable too. And so that sense that they want to be proud of the faith tradition of which they're a part because they see it as relevant and making a difference is very important to them. I don't know that they want to buck all traditions. I don't think that is there. But it's got to be a tradition plus. And that plus means I've got to be part of this, I want to be engaged in it, I want to be part of and I want my views to be valued. Don't even have to accept all of them, but I want to be valued, I want to be seen as having a voice that's important. I may know some things that the traditional church does not know, because I'm more tech savvy, or I can engage in a way that maybe they can't. So please listen to me, please engage with me, please give me space. I think that's what this is all about. And I think potentially we need to be responsive to that as faith communities, because I think that is, here is the future of our churches, our faith traditions. And I think they can bring something to the table which is really important.
All right, thank you very much. And Bishop Olson, you were cautioning that we need to make sure we retain some of the traditions of the church.
I think so. I think it's traditions can't be passed on or even accepted unless people are engaged. And in the sense, it's an aspect of passing on a lived tradition means engaging them as people, listening as much as it is talking. And with that comes a greater sense of belonging, but and a deeper understanding of the truth that is passed on to us. In a sense, there's a development of teaching, a development of talking that goes on that way. I think there's a prophetic element of a faith tradition of mine as well, is that really appeals to the "it is unacceptable" part of life, because there's much injustice that's unacceptable, and to be faithful to God and the conversion of all of us and each of us requires that we not grow in acceptance of that which is unacceptable. But also there's a sense with the faith that for it to be handed on to us or given to us, it requires our acceptance and a willingness to change as well. And I think that's a particular challenge with the millennial generation, is the sense of that in some ways all of us have to come to acceptance each in our own lives that things don't go our way in many parts of life, and that too is a grace. And I think that that's a particular challenge from my standpoint for evangelization today in this particular demographic.
All right, thank you very much. And Dr. Robeck, you too have dealt with and taught many of the millennial generation.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
It hasn't always been a great experience, Well, I mean, one of the things that they do is they do challenge authority. They challenge it very heavily. And when the professor becomes dumber than the students in their perspective, then it gets very difficult in the classroom. So, and I had one experience that way. It was really quite painful. And it took several weeks to get through that. But the reality is, we do have to pay attention to millennials, black, white, or otherwise. They're an important part of of the people, and they're an important part of our church, and so forth. I would say that the issue of social justice, which is often overlooked in many evangelical and certainly Pentecostal churches, is an issue that's really everybody's skittish about it, because too often they link the subject of justice to politics. And once you start preaching on justice, then they think you're taking a different side from where we are politically. Okay? And that's a very difficult kind of a thing to address. And I would say young people are far more open to the spectrum of the political and the spectrum of justice needs than our older people who have decided that I'm this or I'm that, and I don't want to have to talk about that. So I think those are really difficult issues, and they're important issues that the church needs to be addressing. I think what our pastors need is to go back to school and find out that justice has nothing to do with politics. It's really about ethics, morality, and doing the right thing that God has called us to do.
Thank you very much. Dr. Matthews, reaching black millennials, there are some challenges, differences there.
Sure. And I appreciate what everyone has said. And Mel is on to something with the social justice piece. In fact, in the SBC, there's some turbulence, the Southern Baptist Convention, which has African Americans and non-African Americans who are affiliates. And there's some turbulence now that surrounding the whole ideal of social justice versus biblical justice. And is there a distinction, or is there, is this just a semantical thing? But with young black millennials, and I want to commend Dr. Parker for her research. She surveyed over 1,000 African Americans, and she did a great job. I would quibble with one thing that she says. She highlighted the United Methodist Church, an article that they released explained that millennials don't appreciate church and politics, and then of course she mentions that pulpits will be devoid of faith and politics, and pulpits that are devoid of faith and politics will be losing members and will shrink. I think that we have to be careful to put all African Americans into one way of thinking. We're not a monolithic group. We're diversified. You have African Americans who are Republicans, African Americans who are Democrats, African Americans who are independent, and we think differently. And what she does is she cites many of the atrocities that we've seen at the hands of police officers, and so she's talking about, as I understand this, a quote-unquote social justice movement within the church, and the church can't be silent on those things. Currently, the challenge that many African Americans have with our current president. Then, of course, people look at the previous president, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, their semantics, their rhetoric, and that has caused a lot of turbulence in the black church as well. So we'll say more about that later.
All right, thank you very much. And Rabbi Levin, your take on the subject, please.
So I think part of it is to ask ourselves, why do some of these issues of social justice matter so much to millennials? And I think it's because it matters to everybody. If you can remember, like an old-fashioned switchboard, you used to take a cable to plug in to make a connection, right? Well, if you take an individual and you plug them into acts of justice, there's a lot of energy that's transferred in that connection. So I find that when young people or not so young people engage in acts of justice, it fuels them spiritually. And so I think that younger people and not so younger people are looking for their religious organizations to be places that do justice because it fuels them spiritually. So in my community, they love that our congregation works to bring out minority narratives, that it works to create an open and safe space for people who are LGBTQ, and a space, it's even in the Jewish community, for African Americans to feel a part of the community, not apart from the community. But I think millennials are also asking the same kinds of spiritual questions of meaning that we need to also address. How do I raise spiritual children as millennials become parents? How do I find meaning and purpose in my life? And the more that congregations can help millennials answer those questions, the more relevant and powerful they will be for a millennial experience.
All right, thank you very much. And then Dr. Troval, you also have some experience with millennials, both in your own home as well as in the teaching environment.
Yes, yeah, that's true.
So what is your opinion or perspective?
First, I want to commend everyone, because I heard everything that you're all saying, and it's like I would say a hearty amen to all of it, because I think you've highlighted both the values that millennials have and how important they are and how it connects to the human story and our search for justice. And Mel, I can connect with your struggle sometimes in the classroom. I mean, I don't care what generation you're a part of. Yeah. There are positive aspects to that generational character, and there's some also negatives. Where I was going with this particular question is I remember in one of my ethics classes, one of my professors saying, well, justice is an interesting thing. He said, it all depends on whose ox is being gored. Meaning, it's justice in a philosophical sense is to give a person their due. And of course, that just raises the other question, which is behind it, and that is, well, what is due people? I mean, what does God owe humanity, if anything? What do humans owe God? What do we owe one another? What happens? What's the role of forgiveness and justice, and how it's connected? These are really, really complicated and deep questions, which are wonderful to discuss. That's why I always get concerned when a church has a particular agenda, and this gets back to the connection with politics. When you connect political stances with justice too closely, this is where we get into divisions that I think don't need to be.
Right.
All of us can agree that it's important to feed the hungry of the world, but we may disagree quite significantly on what that policy is that we go about to address hunger, or needs of communities in our own cities. I mean, how do you address the needs of those communities? Those are gigantic questions that don't have simple answers, and so we need to be in dialogue.
Thank you so much. Now, of course, you've recognized none of us around this table is a millennial, so we understand that we're discussing an issue that I'm sure we could get some pushback, and it would be wonderful to get that feedback from you. If you're watching and you have these kinds of comments, please write us and let us know. But that doesn't disqualify us from making the observations. I hope at least it doesn't. But Dr. Matthews, you were going to say a few more things. And before you do that, when we discuss the millennials' interests from kind of an observation point of view, we hear and we talk about social justice and we talk about service quite a lot, those two issues. There's some other things as well. That's what you're hearing in the African-American churches?
Oh, yes. I mean, we have millennials in our church, and they are really service-oriented, and they are concerned about the society and what happens in society. So, and I agree with Carl that you have to be very careful as pastors. We have to be careful what we preach from the pulpits and how we preach it, and to make sure that we are not viewed as partisan in our preaching. I think it's our job as ministers and as the older generation to as the writer of the article said, Breonna Parker, that we need to kind of seek out these people and see what type of talents they have and everything. I read a book years ago titled Bringing Out the Best in People, and one of the quotes in that book was, one thing that's more rare than ability is the ability to spot ability. And I think that as leaders, we need to, with our millennials, with all their gifts and talents and distinctions, we need to kind of spot them and just kind of release them to fly for the Lord.
You mentioned preaching, and that is a subject that I think most people understand around this table from having stood behind pulpits and preached. And I think, Bishop, you were suggesting we shouldn't be sacrificing the traditions or changing doctrines to modify, to change things so much that we lose who we are?
Well, I was, along with what the author of the book said, as far as just becoming a follower of a trend, is what I'm saying. I think, I think just building on what's been said before, I think part of the challenge that we face in our society today is that among religious communities, we're not speaking of justice as a theological and human reality, and because of that, the vacuum has been filled by partisanship. And so, I mean, I think that one of the things that I think from millennials is that there's a rejection of concepts, all right, in favor of reality or experience, let's say that. Reality is kind of a concept, but experience. And also kind of calling us that silence is not of the, is not always the right response.
All right, thank you. Dr. Luxon, you want to add to that, correct?
I was going to comment more on Tony's comment about finding and seeking ability. I think, because I think that's one of the issues here. I think sometimes those of us who have been in the church for longer, we own the space. And I think what millennials need, well, all generations, younger generations coming up need, is to be recognized and given some space to actually offer what they have to offer, with the perspectives they have and the connections that they may have in communities that some of us who are older may not have. So I think that's, and particularly the smaller the church community or the faith community get, the more important that is, and the more difficult it is sometimes for that group to give that space.
Thank you. Dr. Robeck, did you have a further comment?
No.
I thought I saw your hand.
Well, no, you didn't see my hand, but I will say that in that painful experience that I had, I sought out the particular individuals that were the problem from my perspective, sat down with them and said, let's talk about this, let's work it through, and I will try to make a change in what I do in the classroom in this particular instance, and that was really helpful.
Okay, thank you. We have 15 seconds, Rabbi. Sorry.
So I think that sometimes what everyone needs to cultivate, including millennials, is a sense of humility. I think sometimes millennials seek out communities that tell them what they already think and validate what they already know. And I would encourage millennials also to have enough humility that they can learn from others and adapt their beliefs as well.
All right, thank you very much. That's all the time we have for this segment. I wish we'd had some more, but there is a summation coming up. Before that, I'd like to ask you to stand by. There's an important announcement. We'll be back in just a few moments.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Welcome back, and thank you again for joining us for today's program. And if you do have suggestions, as Mark has said, please let us know. Write us and visit our website. You can learn about the Town Hall estates there. You can view some past programs of Town Hall sessions before. And right now, we're going to go to summations for today's subject. Let's begin with Bishop Olson. You're first.
Millennials offer each and all of us, including themselves, an interesting paradox. A distrust of concepts and a fragmented means to learning. Listening is as much a part of passing on a tradition as is speaking. But one can also come to acceptance without collaborating in silence with injustice. And there's more to injustice as a much deeper reality and theological experience than simply not getting one's way.
Thank you, Bishop. Now, Dr. Matthews.
Yes, we love millennials, we need millennials, and we value your contribution to the body of Christ. And for those of us who are ministering to millennials, pastors, ministers, we owe it to them to preach in a balanced way when it comes to politics. Our churches should not be viewed as being a Democrat church or a Republican church. We should not be about moving people to the left of the aisle or the right of the aisle, but moving them up to Christ, because Jesus did not come to take sides, he came to take over. And that's the message that we need to send out to our younger generation.
Thank you for your participation today. Now, Dr. Troval, your summation, please.
I appreciate any effort like Dr. Parker's to attempt to bring the tradition of the church, of her faith, to try to connect with any group of people here, the millennials and African American millennials. And so I would encourage that always. I think the one thing that I would always caution would be, question number 2, do you agree that the church more often harbors bandwagoners rather than those who blaze cultural trails? I think that that's a pretty tough thing to decide in the moment, because sometimes we think we're being prophetic, and then 200 years later you realize, oh, this is just one more flick in the cultural moment, and it only reflects the culture. So be careful about saying you're being prophetic.
All right. Thank you for that caution and that counsel. Dr. Robeck, your summation, please.
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand that millennials really, and black millennials included in this, really are open to collaboration. They want to be heard. They want to have meaning in their life. They have lots of skills, lots of talents. They're not dumb people. And I think, Andrea pointed out the fact that we need to be looking at these people and asking, what are the gifts here? How can I help to train and develop them? They're very passionate about what they believe, and we have an opportunity to inculcate certain values into them, but also to listen to the values that they have. The last thing they need is condemnation and shame. What they need to do is to learn about what the community of love is all about.
I hear. Well stated. Thank you. Dr. Luxton.
I think you can have our model, and it's very easy to get this, whether it's generational or in any other group where you have a community and you spend most of your time butting heads with each other and each other's approaches, and I think that is a recipe for a community that is basically going to die or certainly stay static. So how do we have those deep and rich conversations where, yes, there is a lot of humility, and where we teach humility in listening and engaging and helping find the strengths of every person in that community. And that to me is the way to broaden, to open up the community rather than hold it close.
All right, thank you very much. And Rabbi Levin.
I think sometimes communities are very careful not to offend, and in an effort not to offend, they don't stand for anything. Mm-hmm. And I think that figuring out how you can hold a community together while standing up for the tenets of your faith is really an important thing for an entire community to think about. And the other thing I would say to millennials with whom I'm privileged to work all day long is that millennials can't expect the religious community to adapt and change for them. They need to invest themselves in the community, bring their energy, bring their ideas, join, get involved, and become the leaders of the community, and then they will find those communities go exactly where they take them.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone for being on today's program. This has been very informative, hopefully educational, and again, we appreciate the feedback we hear from you, and particularly if you're in that age group of a millennial, let us know. We appreciate your observations, your opinions. You can help guide us for future programs, because I'm sure we're going to come back at this again sometime in the future. But until then, I do want to thank you for joining us, especially if this is your first time. Tell your friends about the program. Do visit us at our website. There's some great information there for you. You can learn more about the Town Hall. You can learn about the Town Hall Estates, and do drop me a line. Thank you so much. The chart of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And so now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.